Dublin to Denver podcast with me, Colum Cronin. And as we near the middle of April, it truly is my favorite time of the year. Oh, it is mock draft season. I love a mock draft. Oh, can't get enough of them. Absolutely fantastic, where people decide on hypotheticals and get very, very excited about all of this imaginary stuff. To delve into a world of pure imagination, I am joined by my friend, colleague, and co-host, Stuart Roach. Stuart, how are you doing, sir?
I am doing well, Colin. I think that the vast majority of our listeners are made up by Americans. I'm not sure if I have the exact data to back that up, but that's what we were led to believe. So just in case, and I did spend time in America, and I'm very fond of America and American people in general. Just in case people are unsure, Colin was being a little bit sarcastic with that intro. Just a smidgen, a dash of sarcasm, because there is nobody I know that least likes mock drafts than my friend Colum from Cork, which caused some slight consternation last year when I fully immersed myself in mock draft season, only to be burnt beyond repair, to which I would never ever re-engage with mock drafts ever again. So this time last year I was fully I was absolutely gone mock draft fever high, and now I realize that it does actually fill a purpose, which is to get us through the next 2 weeks. Because actually, Colin, this time 2 weeks at the time of recording, the Denver Broncos will be getting ready for their sole pick in the first 2 days. It's Friday now. It's about 4:30. So I think the second round over here starts at around 11 o'clock our time. So it'll be close. It's not one to stay up for, Broncos fans, because we're right at the very back of round 2. And if our old friend George has shown us anything over the last few years, he will immediately trade back into round 3 and grab one of those extra additional 4th rounders, because that just seems to be his modus operandi. And look, he's earned the right to do what he wants at this point. But I wouldn't be confident that we'll stay where we are. Now, we could move up. Maybe some of that aggression that we heard so much about, that we failed to see virtually any of, maybe that might be more evident on draft night. And who knows if the player that we love, if that guard or if that cornerback that we so desperately coveted in round 2, Colin, falls to us for some reason, and we feel that we just have to grab one of those positions of absolutely no need, then we may make a trade. But I don't know. I'm not sure. It's, as I said last week, Colin, I think we were in agreement. It's brilliant to get Waddle. I think we're all really excited about looking at him as a true offensive weapon. But it has taken a little bit of the air out of it for Broncos fans in regards to the draft. That's fine. It's a price we're willing to pay. But certainly for Denver Broncos content creators such as ourselves, this has proven to be a tricky time. So we're doing our best. So bear with us. And yeah, we promise you that there's only going to be probably this and next week's episode, and then we'll actually have some stuff to talk about that resembles actual news. So just hey, bear with us, listeners. We're doing our best here.
Yeah, because there on the real news side of things, there isn't a whole lot out there. There was a report out from Mike Sando in the Athletic, Stuart, and Sando was saying that the Broncos were very interested in Travis Etienne, and that he was their coveted running back, and they believed that they were in a strong position to acquire Travis Etienne until he got the big payday from the Saints. And I'll let you have the floor for a little bit on this, and then I might come back in on Sando later.
Yeah, well, I think Colum, just going back to around the time of free agency starting, I think it became quite clear pretty early that Kenneth Walker wasn't really going to be an option for the Broncos, and his move to the Chiefs seemed inevitable, and there was just report after report after report. I think the weekend before free agency started proper. So, I think myself certainly, I can't remember what your stance on it was, but I know an awful lot of Broncos fans had kind of gotten around to the idea that okay, well we'll just focus our attention on Travis Etienne, who I think is an outstanding NFL running back, and I think since the minute he came into the league, he's been just a really really good player. He's very good catching the ball as well as rushing. He's had one or two injury problems, but nothing in comparison to the Owen Hargreaves-esque run of form that poor old J.K. Dobbins has had. American listeners, check that out. It's a very talented yet incredibly oft injured Manchester United midfielder from about 15 years ago. So, I think I was really disappointed, Colin, when we didn't get Travis Etienne. And again, this has nothing to do with J.K. Dobbins' talent as a running back, because we all know how good J.K. Dobbins is as a running back. It's absolutely to do with his injury record, which cannot be ignored. And as we've pointed out a few times, the now legendary hip drop tackle, which has taken on. I mean, at this stage, Colin, that hip drop tackle may actually end up in the Hall of Fame. The amount of attention it's received in the last few weeks, because it has become this almost sort of get out of jail free card that J.K. Dobbins and those around him have played, to the point now where it's almost as if that was the first injury he's ever had in his entire career, as opposed to the 17th or whatever it is at this point in time. So I had hoped that we would get Travis Etienne. I thought Travis Etienne would have been a really good addition for the Broncos. I just think he's a more durable running back than J.K. Dobbins. His output has been almost quite similar to J.K. Dobbins. And then we lost out on him. And there was two pieces of coping mechanism sort of utilized to try and excuse the Broncos not getting Travis Etienne. Because I don't think the powers that be bothered with we prefer J.K. Dobbins all along. That came later and was reiterated, I think, recently by Sean Payton. But the two pieces of coping mechanism that we used were he wanted too much money, and he wants to go back to his home state of Louisiana. Now, you can take what you want with the first one, because he was obviously a little rich. You see, the other thing about Dobbins is, Colin, he's also somebody who's not cost as much money as perhaps an NFL running back of his caliber normally would, because he gets injured all the time. The stuff about him, Travis Etienne, wanting to go back to Louisiana. Hey, if you believe that stuff, great. You probably also believe recently that all those round and oval chocolate things that arrived in the house were delivered by a massive bunny. And that's absolutely your right to do that. That is fine. So, yeah, maybe Travis Etienne really desperately wanted to finish out his career playing for the Saints, who, as everybody knows, is primed for NFC domination for years to come. It's nonsense. There was absolutely nothing to suggest that if the Broncos had really seriously pushed for Travis Etienne, they wouldn't have convinced him to join Denver. Because Denver are in a Super Bowl window. Denver is actually primed to become a powerhouse in the AFC. And there's little or nothing to suggest, bar unfortunate injury, to say key players like Bo Nix or somebody like that the Broncos are not going to be in playoff contention year after year after year. So I didn't buy that for any sort of serious amount of time. I don't think anybody else that watches football or has any interest in it bought that either. But it does kind of hammer home the point, Colin, that again, and it's one that you've made on numerous occasions, you just need to be careful with the stuff that you choose to believe, because we have now heard, and this is history kind of being rewritten, that J.K. Dobbins was our number one priority all along. And again, if you believe that, that's fine. That's absolutely fine. But why would he be our priority all along? Because there was ample opportunities to get J.K. Dobbins signed during the season if you truly believed in him. You didn't sign him to let's not forget Jacob Dobbins was signed to a 1-year deal last year. When Jacob Dobbins was sort of displaying Pro Bowl form, when he was amongst the best rushers in the NFL before he got injured, which should have come as no surprise to anybody, that was the time then you would have really moved on J.K. Dobbins if he was a key priority, because he was in your house. You were the leader in the clubhouse in regards to getting him signed, and you chose not to. So I think that should probably show you exactly what it was that the kind of regard that Jacob Dobbins was held in at that point. Now, look, as we've said again and again, the guy's supposed to be a brilliant leader in the locker room. He seems like an extremely personable guy. He's a fantastically talented running back. But anybody who believes that Jacob Dobbins was the Broncos' #1 running back on their free agent big board needs their heads examined. They really do, because it's not true. And it's not true because it couldn't be true, because it would have taken an almighty blind spot to realize that this guy is just not reliable, unfortunately. So look, Colum, in some ways I know we're probably going to touch on positions for the draft and stuff like that. But again, and in fairness, I did see Tyler Columbus was a guest on a Broncos YouTuber yesterday, who is a friend of ours, and I'm not going to slate the guy, but he is an extremely positive Broncos fan, and let him at it, and fair play to him, and he's made his brand by doing that, and I take my hat off to him. I'm not of the same bent in regards to where my natural sensibilities lie in regards to my sports teams. But Tyler Columbus was on as a guest yesterday, and in fairness to Tyler Columbus, who's ruffled a few feathers, although he did sort of step back when it really started to heat up. But when it was put to him that the Broncos didn't really have very many holes in the roster, in fairness, Tyler immediately shot back and he goes, "No, we have 3 significant holes in the roster: running back, tight end, and inside linebacker." Excuse me. So as much as there's been sort of a consistent push by the usual suspects, by friendly journalists to the team, by your old pal P. Smythe, presumably sending out some kind of group email or WhatsApp message about the Broncos having a complete roster. We don't. The problems that we have on the roster are exactly the same as they were this time last year. Now, hopefully, there's still an opportunity to get those fixed. But I do think it's yet another example, as I said, of the kind of double speak, of the kind of Orwellian info that we're sort of fed. And I do think that, I know myself and yourself are certainly a bit more cynical and are able to see past it. And we'd like to think that if we've achieved anything with this podcast before we're inevitably taken off the air, that it will have helped some of our listeners see past the haze and the chemical alley mutterings of some journos and see really what's going on. Again, not slating Jacob Dobbins. I think he's a brilliant running back when he's healthy. The problem is, and always will be, that he cannot stay healthy for any considerable amount of time in the NFL. That is a huge, huge problem in that position.
Yeah, and the injury issues predate the NFL also. It's not just something that emerged. And I think that is what you have to consider. And that's why the asterisk is there. I think what I will say, Stuart, is I think this is going to be fascinating in many respects, because I suppose it's a larger point. The Broncos and Sean Payton are doing something that no other team has done previously. They've brought back essentially 21 of 22 starters. And teams don't do this, right? So Sean Payton is very much carving his own path. Now, he was absolutely spot on with Bo Nix, despite the league-wide skepticism of him. I note that Bo Nix skeptics are very quiet at the moment. Now, I will say they're not giving Bo praise. I think they are waiting in the long grass, hoping that he struggles on return from injury, some of them. But to the wider point about Sean Payton, I mean, there's I suppose people always talked about how Belichick, when the Patriots were particularly successful, how he would zig when the rest of the league zagged. Well, Sean Payton has zigged squared, because we really are going to see. It is proof positive of whether continuity is the way to go. And we'll see. I mean, look, Sean Payton has the history, and he does not lack for self-confidence. So he's going to back himself, and we get to see. I think overall we both think that this team will be highly competitive, but there are those position groups that do need to be filled, and glad to hear Tyler recognizes that. That maybe brings us to, because I think you can talk some position groups you might like to see teams draft. I think when you start talking about players, like, great, it's wishing and hoping, but ultimately you have no control, over what the teams in front of you do. So you don't exactly know what's going to be there. But in terms, Stuart, of, look, we've talked about it kind of ad nauseum, around the running back, the need for a running back. We both are waving giant flags on that one, desperately calling for reinforcements, because I think it's suffice to say neither of us believe that. We believe RJ Harvey is a great weapon, but we don't think that he is an adequate replacement if and when J.K. Dobbins suffers another injury. So that is, look, that's obviously an area. I know that there have been talks about, like, lots of different. I'm interested in your opinion on a piece around whether the Broncos should consider, depending on who's there, but how high of a priority would you have the tackle position, given the ages of Garrett Bowles and Mike McGlinchey, respectively?
To me, Colum, I think it's a good question. Just to go back before I answered your point in regards to, you never know what's going to happen to the draft in front of you. One of the stories that our old friend Smithy didn't choose to try to put out with fire was the fact that the Broncos were absolutely going to take Ekuba, the wide receiver who was taken by the Bucs immediately before, and then they ended up taking Jahdae Barron. And I think if there was ever a story that you wanted extinguished from a Broncos point of view, that would have been it. But for some reason, that one was let live, which would suggest that it was true, and there was no point even denying it. So yeah, you're right. I think there's no point in fixating on particular players, because all it takes is a team to do something unexpected, a team that you didn't think had a need at running back or tight end to jump up and grab somebody that they've fallen in love with. So for example, Eli Stowers is a player that's been mentioned a lot, the Vanderbilt tight end. People have been talking about him for a long time. You get a run on tight ends because Sadiq is by far and away the best tight end in the draft. You get a run on tight ends, and suddenly Stowers, who everybody presumably be there at 62, is long gone. So you kind of need to react accordingly. I think, in fairness to George Colum, who we do sometimes give a little bit of a hard time, but most of it, I think, is good-natured generally. He's got a good record in the second round, to be fair. So you got Nick Bonito and you got Marvin Mims, two all-pro players. In fairness to him, I know Marvin Mims is an all-pro at kick returner, but he's been an excellent pickup. So you have to say that 62 is not a position that's kind of just a throw in a dart randomly and hoping for the best. Like, you can do something with that position. I would not draft a tackle at round 62, Colum, unless somebody that was just unmissable fell for whatever reason. I don't think a premium tackle is going to fall to 62. I don't think that's going to happen, because it's just it's a position of such value that somebody's going to take a chance on a talented guy. You only need to remember, what was the name of the fellow that was eventually taken by the Dolphins? The infamous video that was leaked on the night. What was his name again?
Laramie Tunsil.
Yeah, Laramie Tunsil. Like Laramie Tunsil, was it his uncle, I think, released a video of him with a bong He still went, what was it, around pick 20? You know, he would have thought that that was going to be a catastrophic decline. So I think tackle is something that you push down the road for one more year, Colin. I think this time next year is the time that you would start to seriously consider a replacement for either Bowles or McGlinchey, you know, to have a really top quality player in there that can take over when injury strikes or when they need a rest or whatever, and then gradually you can kind of phase out whichever of the two that you think is the one that you want, you know, the one that needs to go first. Because in fairness, they've been incredibly durable, Colin. You know, it's almost unheard of for the Broncos continuity that we've had on the offensive line for the best parts of 2 years. Obviously, we had Ben Powers going down, but then Paltrow came in, did a great job, and got himself a 2-year extension. So, you know, I do, you know, I'm fully aware of the fact that if you don't address backup tackle, then you're leaving yourself to just literally one play out of thousands in the season, and the whole thing kind of falls apart. But I think, you know, you can't have 3 starters for every 2 positions, because just the way the NFL is constituted now, it just doesn't happen. So there is an element of good fortune to this kind of stuff. But I think this is not the season to do this. I think that you are genuinely in a Super Bowl window, and there are still positions that are sorely lacking. We know what they are. On the offense, it's running back and it's tight end. On the defense, it's inside linebacker. You know, and I think, as I said, I think next year is the year that I would really be looking to do that, because I just don't see a blue chip prospect falling to 62. I don't see him falling to 42, to be honest with you. These guys get snapped up. So I would be gravely disappointed if one of those 3 positions of real need aren't addressed with pick 62. And then when you're getting down to sort of the 2 picks we have in the 4th round column, there's kind of not really any point in taking a tackle there. If you want 9 times out of 10, if you want to get yourself a starting left or right tackle column, you draft them in the 1st round. That's just the way the NFL it goes. Like, those, you can find guys, absolutely you can, but like your 4 premium positions, your 4 franchise cornerstones are quarterback, left tackle, pass rusher, and lockdown corner. Generally speaking, those guys, you get them in the 1st round. Of course, you can get you know, Nick Benito, as I just mentioned, is around 2. He's an elite pass rusher. But generally speaking, you know, you want a Super Bowl quarterback, you get them in the 1st round. You want a franchise left, right tackle, you tend to get them in the 1st round. So that's one I'm punting down the road, Colin. So I think I would probably just cross my fingers and everything else that the 2 lads can make it through another season unscathed. And it's something then that I would look to address this time next year.
Yeah, I do think it is something that we absolutely have to, you know, address sooner rather than later. But I agree with you; it is one of those positions where, generally, look, people will always, there's always exceptions, but overall, you know, you are, um, if you want the best, you have to draft high. It is, and to to have a go at our GM, who, look, has done a pretty solid job, but I would argue that, you know, franchise tackles are more difficult to find than franchise corners. I still would say that franchise QBs are the most difficult thing to find of all, but trying to find a franchise tackle, you know, so many teams take guys and absolute disaster zones, even when they go in the early rounds, because it's so difficult. Like, everything's kind of almost stacked against you in certain respects, and you've got to be so good, and it can take time to learn it. I suppose, Stuart, you know, was there anything else that you wanted to touch on this particular episode?
Not really, Colin. I think we've done remarkably well to get, well, we got 20 minutes out of this. 25 minutes. Well, that's an achievement. No, look, as I said earlier on, I do think that this is kind of hopefully we'll perform miracles next week and also wring whatever drips of moisture we can from the stone that is the Denver Broncos. We've even tempted fate 3 weeks in a row now, Colin, where absolutely nothing has happened after we finished recording. So no, and I also I now think that we're not going to be signing to say the likes of Cam Jordan or David Njoku before the draft, because if we do, we're going to lose those fourth round compensatory picks that George clutches to his chest. Like a young lover caresses a note that has come through the door from their sweetheart, who they cannot wait to see again. So it makes sense to wait at this stage, Colin. You would hope that the Saints connection, obviously, that we have through Sean Payton, would mean that Cam Jordan is probably waiting until after the draft. Maybe he's told other teams that he's already signed up for the Broncos, and it's just a case of formalities after the draft is concluded. I would hope that that's the case, because I think he's too good a player for somebody not to have grabbed him. So I do think that's the Jonathan Franklin Myers replacement hopefully sorted out. But look, yeah, as I said, this is a downtime. But it won't be for much longer. And it's what is interesting, Colum, is that despite sort of some noises coming from various Colorado-based news sources, there are holes on this roster, and we are going into the draft with a little bit of pressure on George and Sean, because certainly pick 62, Colum, really has to deliver, and in a way, far more so than pick 20 did last year, so I think that does add some pressure, and it's something that we cannot be 2 weeks out from the draft and I've not addressed those position groups that we keep banging on about, because if we have, then we've really missed a trick, and this historic attempt to run it back with, what was it, 21 out of 22 or 27 out of 29 or so, whatever. That we'll see. But most of the evidence that we have in front of us would suggest that it's not going to be successful. It's a unique experiment from Sean and George. I do think the Waddle trade has changed the perception of the Broncos off season. There's certainly less criticism. It was baffling when it was happening. Like when we were getting the Julian McLaughlin, Lil Jordan Humphreys re-signings, it actually began to feel like the lads were taking the piss. But I do think the Waddle thing has changed everything, rightly so. He's an elite, superstar wide receiver. That means that the whole makeup of the Broncos offseason is now different. But as I said, there's still a little bit of pressure there. We're not complete. We the whole thing about running a back column is great, but it's not like we're running back the 2013 Denver Broncos offense. That was an offense last year that for large periods of the season was absolutely just flattered. It was just a non-event. And it improved towards the end of the season from a Bo Nix point of view, but he struggled a little bit at the start of the season. J.K. Dobbins was easily the best offensive weapon that we had, and then he went down, and then suddenly Nix had to take it on board. So there was problems there. So it's not like this was a well-oiled machine. We're still counting on everybody kind of taking those steps in years 2 and 3 and whatever else. So no, it's not finished by any stretch of the imagination. So there's a little bit of pressure there. So in fairness, as I did say, and I will read it, George has a history of drafting well in the second round, and he needs to continue that in order for this team to make a really deep playoff run, as opposed to just sort of a wild card or something like that. So we'll see. And as I said, this time 2 weeks we'll be really getting ready, and maybe we'll have some rumors about who the Broncos love. One last thing, Colum. Sorry, I just remembered it now. There has been quite a few visits of sort of lower round safeties to the Broncos in the last few days. And given Brandon Jones's injury and the fact that PJ Locke has moved on, and Devin Key and JL Skinner are both superb special teams players, but haven't shown a huge amount on defense yet. Safety could be a sneaky position of need. Now, I'm not saying we need to draft a safety in round 2, but certainly could be a position to look at in the fourth round with those 2 picks that we have. But just there's a little bit of sort of heat there in the last couple of days, where I think they've had 2 visits from safeties, and not safeties that you'd expect to go in the first 2 rounds, but decent players nonetheless. I think one of the guys from Maryland, he was a good player. But yeah, that's one to keep an eye on, safety, which is probably not a position that we've spoken about much recently. But with both Brandon Jones and Hufanga having some injury history, probably a position to keep an eye on as we get closer to the draft.
Look at Stewart sneaking in some extra draft content there right at the end. You can find Stewart over on Blue Sky SRO23. I'm across social media at Colum from Cork. If you enjoy the podcast, please do rate, review, subscribe, or better yet, just tell a friend about us. We will be back at some point next week when we'll still be a week away from the draft. Lucky me.
Are you not going to tell everybody that this time next week we're going to be doing our first ever Dublin to Denver mock draft, where we're going to pick all 32 teams first 4 rounds in order to get the Broncos in? Are you going to? I thought you were going to announce that one today. No, it's you were going to keep it secret, were you?
Stuart is there's gonna be an AI version of me next week to conduct this mock draft with Stuart. They won't just do the 4 rounds; it'll be the full 7. So you can look forward to that, listeners. For now, all that remains to be said is go Broncos.
Go Broncos.